You are listening to This is Oklahoma, hosted by Mike Hearn, telling stories of Oklahomans and those that have made it their home.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of This is Oklahoma podcast. Mike Hearn here, your host, back with another episode. Excited to share this episode with you today. But before we do, I've got to thank our sponsors. First of all, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame. They've been a huge part of this podcast for the last few years. So the Oklahoma Hall of Fame have been sharing Oklahoma's story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com. And for daily updates, go to oklahomahof on Instagram and give them a follow. Our other sponsor today is the Chickasaw Nation. Now, the Chickasaw Nation have sponsored pretty much everything in Oklahoma. They're a huge supporter of Oklahoma. And it's an honor to have their name and their brand supporting this podcast. A huge shout out to Governor Anatobi for supporting this podcast. It really means a lot. Our third sponsor is Diffie Ford Lincoln down in El Reno. Now, this one makes me so happy because these guys are great friends of mine, play a lot of golf together. I've bought my cars from them, do most of my oil changes down there, have a cup of coffee, hang out down in El Reno. It's a good spot to go. And not only are they great friends, but they provide a great service. So for over 60 years, third generation family owned Oklahoma business down in El Reno. They're also in Bethany as well. So people in the Bethany area know the Diffies really well. But if you're looking for anything new, used, Ford, Lincoln, or whatever, I'm sure they could find anything you want. Check them out, diffieford.net, and then on Instagram at diffiefordlincoln. This episode is presented by the Choctaw Nation. The Choctaw people have a rich history and a bright future. At the Choctaw Cultural Center, you can take part in a story 14,000 years in the making. Stroll through our immersive exhibits portraying Choctaw life from the moment our ancestors emerged from the Nani Weha in Mississippian homelands to the Trail of Tears, where we lost so many loved ones, and finally to the modern-day tribe making a positive impact on local communities throughout southeastern Oklahoma. Try your hand at our social dancing and stickball and learn more about our vibrant culture through demonstrations, workshops, and classes. The kids will have a blast in our Luxie Activity Center. The Choctaw Cultural Center is more than a museum. It's a living, breathing experience. Visit choctawculturalcenter.com to plan your visit. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of This is Oklahoma. Mike Hearn here, host, back with another episode down at the Oklahoma City Chamber today. First time I've ever been in the building, and it's the first time I put in the address, so now I know where it is, which is good. But I need to come to that dinner that's outside of the park.
Yes, you do.
I've always seen it, and now I understand why it's right outside, because obviously it's a big part of what you guys do. But my guest today is the president CEO, our new president CEO of the Chamber, Christy Gillenwater. Thank you for having me down here.
Well, thank you for allowing us the opportunity. That's great.
Yeah, I think I had a lot of people have sung your praises, and we're super pumped to get you down here because you started January 5th, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
correct.
Today is May 5th. It's Cinco de Mayo today.
That's right.
So yeah, it's 4 or 5 months then into your job, but obviously you're very comfortable and this role to you. You were previous president in Chattanooga and then Southwest Indiana. So this is not something that's out of the norm for you, right?
Yes.
Other than a new city, obviously.
Right, yes.
But before we dive into all the chamber stuff and all the boring, not boring, quote, day-to-day stuff, tell me about you. What's kind of your story? Where'd you grow up and how do you weave into this job?
Great question, Mike. 25 years in the industry. It's flown by.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of my story behind it. So I grew up in Cincinnati, the daughter of an entrepreneur. Yes, he worked for a larger company for a while, and that's a part of the story, but then was an entrepreneur. And at the time of his passing, heartbreak to me, this marks 12 years this month since I lost him. He actually was a small business owner employing about 40 people. But at the time I was in college, he was actually handling site selection work for the company he ran. And he was spending a lot of time with chambers and economic development leaders and felt very strongly that this was the career made for me, or I was made for this career, either way. And he's so much of the reason I'm here today. My mother was a social worker by trade, and my father grew up on a farm outside of Cincinnati, so kind of that hard work ethic was instilled at me at a very young age. I was a bit sporty growing up, so very competitive, and but I also see other cities, for example, other markets as co-opetition, opportunities to work together, but also how can we learn from them and really have them challenge us to be better. But yes, went off to, when I was at Indiana University for my undergrad, I asked to intern. I was their first intern, 40,000 students right down the street, and the first intern at the Chamber after my father had suggested, again, this line of work for me. And I just fell in love with it and haven't looked back. But I have a younger brother who's a urologist in North Carolina. And really humbled to be here. I have 2 bonus children and 2 that are older and 2 who are here with us. And a husband who is an entrepreneur and real estate investor himself.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah. So great recap. I wish all my guests could do it that well. not putting shade on some of my guests who like to ramble, but anyway, I'll stop there. Otherwise, I'll get myself in trouble. That's a really neat story, and sorry to hear about your dad passing, and obviously this month being a special month for you guys, and the whole reason that you are here today is because of that, and that's special. That really is special, and you get reminded of that because you work with small businesses and all this stuff every day. So it is a nice reminder and a great kind of sense of you're doing well and giving back and just making him proud every day. So I'm sure he's pumped.
Thank you. Thank you.
So growing up, you mentioned sports. Like, are we running around into sports? You said the younger brother, is he pushing you into sports as well? Like, were you kind of like, you mentioned your dad being an influence. Is dad pushing you into sports as well, wishing he had a first son? Like, what's the dynamic going on?
Oh, that's a great question. So, that's interesting. I'll have to ask my mom that. I remember playing soccer at age 6.
Okay.
Loved soccer. Soccer was my love. Would have loved to have played in college. I tore my ACL my senior year, which is also, I think, part of the story because, how I handled that, right? This kind of crushing experience, if you will, thinking perhaps I could walk on a team. I wasn't that great, but could I walk on somewhere? And that was all over. And so it was a good kind of adjustment period for me. I think similarly, I started swimming. I'm trying to remember, I was probably about 8 because my mother actually grew up not being able to swim, and she had a real fear of the water. It's kind of interesting because my brother and I became such water people. I used to compete in sprint triathlons. My husband were boaters. We're very much, our whole family now, water people. And, what a gift she gave us. Played basketball. I was awful. And, but tall. So, that was part of it. But swimming and soccer, I think, were really my love. Participated in track. I have kind of a funny story. In fact, I was telling our sitter the story last night, who plays collegiate volleyball, and I said yes. My sophomore year in high school, I was the sophomore on the team running a 4x100 race. We made the state in Ohio, and the third leg of our relay, which is the slowest leg usually. And I have a senior and 2 juniors, and I see the 2 juniors, together, and number 1 passing to number 2, and number 2 running to me, and I thought, something's not right, something is off, and I notice no baton in her hand. Right? And she's running towards me with no baton, and I look at her and she said, just run.
Just run.
Just run. And so we ran. Of course, we were disqualified. Yeah. And I remember our lead, Patty, just, beating herself up. And we said, listen, it could have been any one of us. We were talking to you. No one noticed. You didn't have the baton in your hand. It's on all of us. And again, I think just a good life lesson about, teamwork. And when someone makes a mistake, hey, no matter how much you train, no matter how much you prepare, sometimes things happen, and you just have to learn from it and move on. And so anyway, I loved my sport experience. The understanding and value of teamwork and preparation and collaboration and intensity, and again that competitive spirit, but also having fun. And I think part of the reason my parents probably sent me into a lot of sports or encouraged it was I was extremely social and very much an extrovert, and so channeling some of that energy, I think, through sport probably was wise on their part.
Yeah, that's when we look back, right? And I love doing podcasts like this, and it kind of forces the guest to look back, because you might have not. It brings back so many memories,
Yes.
right? And it's such kind of a fun time, because you bring out those stories, and you're like, thinking that the world is so important at 15, 16 to 18, right? And like, you've got so many big decisions to make in life, and really you don't, right? But at the time, to you,
hindsight,
it's hindsight. And then you look back and you're like, wow, like there's so many lessons in that, and fun times. And I mean, I'm a big, I wouldn't be here without the sport of golf. I played, football, soccer growing up as well. And, sport is so important, I think, to kids. And we don't have kids, but whenever we decide to, like, sport is going to be at the front of it. Just because of the skills, you don't have to be good at it. That's not the point. It's the fact that the life skills you build around sport, the team things, the individual things, and obviously we just had the Oklahoma City Marathon, last weekend, and my wife ran her first marathon. And I said that, she was she was not happy with her performance, because she got underestimated the heat or whatever, and but she finished, and then I said, well, look, sleep on it, I want to know how you feel tomorrow. And she woke up the next day and she's like, I feel like I can do anything now. Like, so much confidence, right? And that's that's at 30 years old, right? And imagine doing, competing into, as a kid, younger, and it builds so much confidence. And she never really competed as an athlete as a kid.
Yes.
Whereas, we did, right? So we have that kind of leg up, and that mental kind of a little earlier mental toughness with, I can do it. I can believe in myself. And even though there's parents screaming at us and there's noise, like getting that quiet space in your head and focusing on a track or in the pool or on a soccer field, like that builds so much character at a young age.
You're completely right. And then looking at those elite athletes, I mean, just, those who compete, and understanding sportsmanship and the importance of it. I mean, I think that's something that we must constantly remind our kids of. Unfortunately, it isn't, as strong maybe as when I felt like when I was growing up. But and then to value those elite athletes. But I mean, marathon, those who can complete a marathon, the mental will it took in her to do that, that's phenomenal.
Yeah, it's I was cheering. I was not running. I did last year. So I've done it. I've done it once.
Good for you.
She's trying to get me to do it again, but it's a big commitment. We'll see.
Yes.
So then, sport's huge for you growing up. Like you said, you're tall. Your kind of mum has a fear of swimming, which kind of forces you to learn and get you into that. And now you love swimming and love being in the water. And you mentioned kind of soccer. The goal was to walk on somewhere, but you have an injury that forces you to not play soccer now. So where'd you go to university then? What was the decision thing? If I can't play soccer, where am I going to go? And what was the goal? Was it that early on that with the internship that it was like, okay, my mind's kind of set, let's go and follow Dad's advice and go to the chamber?
So great question. So it was interesting. My mother didn't want me to travel that far away for university, and kind of put a few-hour radius on me. So, Ohio at the time had more schools per capita than anywhere else in the country. She had done all this research, and I had to convince my mechanical engineering, father, that was his framework, right, of why I wanted to go out of state. I had looked at a number of schools, and candidly, when I stepped foot on Indiana University, I really fell in love with it. And one thing part of the admissions team had told us that day is you can make a big school small, but you can't make a small school big. And I graduated from a school that was 100 students in my graduating class, and I thought, that's so interesting. I've been at the same school since I was in kindergarten and matriculated on through high school. Very strong school. And I felt like, hey, I want to see how I do in a bigger market, if you will, 40,000 students, right? And so just really fell in love with the campus. At the time, had entered into the business school, and so it was just a great fit in that regard. And then, as I went on through, and it's kind of interesting, and this is part of the story too. So I'm in the Kelley School of Business. I still... Well, technically, you were initially admitted, and then at the end of your sophomore year, you receive word whether you're in for your junior and senior year. And I still remember reflecting that summer as I found out I was accepted, and I looked at my dad and I said, I'm not sure if the business school is where I want to be right now. And we had this School of Public Environmental Affairs, and I think that was kind of the start of this split in me, where there was so much in the business side that I valued, but there was this nonprofit kind of piece calling me as well. And I took a nonprofit management class, and they said, okay, you can either take this final exam or you can go out and conduct an internship and write a substantial paper on your learnings, what kind of work you did, and the impact it's had on your life. And I took the latter move, and again, that's where my father really stepped in and suggested chamber economic development work. And I still remember the CEO of the chamber when I went in to see him. He had been a military leader at Ukraine in Indiana. He was 6'6", real intimidating guy for most, but really was just a teddy bear. And I said to him, hey, I'd like to come in and intern, right? And he said, why? And we talked through it and called me back the next day and said, let's do this. And I still remember saying, you have 40,000 students down the street. I can't believe you all haven't had interns before. And it's kind of fun because again, really became passionate about it. I ended up renting a chamber just outside of Indianapolis upon graduation. But years later, not quite 10 years later, I was actually speaking in Indianapolis on the topic of forming an, investor angel network. And Steve came up to me, again, that CEO at the time of the Bloomington Chamber, and he said, hey, I'm retiring. You should apply for my job. And I said, well, I'm really happy with what I'm doing. And I just finished my MBA, and, I'm on the economic development side of this chamber. And he said, no, you didn't hear me. You are applying for my job, And
effectively, I'm giving you the job. You just need to apply for it.
Which it had an extensive, application process. There were 60 applicants, and it was very extensive. But having that from him of, you must do this. Yeah. Yes. Anyway, he was quite an influencer in my life. But yeah, all started off as, again, the power of interns. And here we have, the Intern OKC program. We try to help make those connections. So many companies here in OKC, are mindful about that opportunity, bringing interns into their place of work. And we can't thank them enough because for so many people, it lights up their life and changes their life path. In some cases, they might decide, hey, this isn't right for me, but better to find out now than later, right?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And it's interesting that, that is kind of the pivot point, right? Because you could have easily gone and followed Dad's footsteps and done, I'm going to be a business owner, I'm going to be an entrepreneur.
Yes.
And it's nice to know that early on, right? Because a lot of people, think, it's because in this country, it's so easy to start a business, right? Like, especially with, social media, online, website, whatever it is, and AI and all the stuff that's happening now. Like, it's not, you don't need to get a brick and mortar store and have product. You can just drop ship everything from your phone. But it is interesting that you made that switch early on. And I'm interested to know, did you have any just kind of ideas in the back of your mind thinking, if I were to start a business, like it would be... And, did you have anything that you thought or dreams as a kid that I would love to own a business someday and it would be this?
Great question. It's interesting because my father had always said, hey, I have X put aside for you. I mean, I grew up, I was very blessed. I was very fortunate. My father worked really hard. Again, grew up on a farm, waking up at 5 a.m. every day to help with the livestock, right? And actually, I think it was 4. But he said, I have a certain amount of money I've set aside to help you, start your first business. But for me, I think on my journey, I became fascinated with supporting and recognizing the risk that others took in starting their business and representing them relentlessly when it came from, to the advocacy side of the house, but also connecting them, connecting small businesses with larger businesses, connecting small businesses with medium-sized businesses who they're interested in meeting and potentially talking about their product or their line of service. And so for me, I think it was that service side of me that started to balance out a little bit more. And I guess I like to think of myself as somewhat of an entrepreneur, but more for communities and community building, just not on the for-profit side of it.
Yeah. Selfish question for me, because I kind of love cars and motorsport. with the Indianapolis 500 and Indy, I mean, did you get any chance to go, and how was that experience?
Oh, yes.
Right?
In fact, we have annual tickets.
Yeah.
We just sold our tickets the other week. But yes, a lot of times at the Indianapolis 500, both in the stands and in the suites, right? And it is a magical experience if you've never been. I've been, pre-COVID and post-COVID, and it is such a sports spectacle, and just how it transforms Indianapolis for the month of May, really, is quite phenomenal, and just the spirit it brings. And I think one thing I love, and my husband's a man of many interests, and I kind of love that. He used to fly planes, boating, right? I mean, scuba diving, all these, and he tends to go all in, right? Ex-Army Ranger, they're intense in their sport, if you will. And what you find is this interesting subculture, in each one of these sports, and in motorsports, it's really a fascinating culture. Indy sport different, IndyCar different than NASCAR, and it's kind of fascinating. I've been to a NASCAR race in Indy, as well as the the European
F1.
Yeah, F1,
Yeah.
of course. F1 race that they hosted there once, and just each one has kind of a different subculture to it. But yes, the 500 special.
It's bucket list for me, so
yes.
I will have to talk to you about
Good
that
to know.
later.
We'll have to offline.
I would love to do that, because
Yes.
I think my wife would not. It would be me and someone else, because she doesn't understand I'm kind of similar to your husband. Like I just, there's so many different things that I love to do and want to be outside, and I can't fly a plane, and I've not served, but I love cars and golf and everything else. So
there you go.
I'm sure we have a great conversation.
No doubt.
So your former boss comes back and says you need to apply for this job. You're kind of finishing your MBA successfully. You get that job. Where do we go from there?
Sure. So in Bloomington, home of Indiana University, right? And so spent, 7.5, almost 8 years there, very heavily involved in policy work and building of an interstate. That was, in fact, a new terrain interstate from southern Indiana, what would be Evansville, what would be my next job, Evansville to Bloomington, which is kind of an interesting story. Here Evansville, a much more conservative, business intense kind of community, and met a lot of their leadership as we all advocated together for this new terrain interstate. But that was some of the body of work there, new bypass, so it was very heavily kind of an infrastructure related role, but also around intellectual property, research and development, innovation, and how we really take that ecosystem from an economic development standpoint in Bloomington to the next level. As we were connecting to southern Indiana, as we were now finally going to have an interstate to Indianapolis, we knew that population would start to grow, and it was a real opportunity for economic development. And so that was kind of interesting, and just watching Indiana University really transform, more and more students coming in from the East Coast. So you saw all this new housing and downtown pop up of what East Coast type of students were looking for. And international. I mean, their international student base really boomed during that time as well. And so that was really exciting work. As I mentioned, during the I-69 lobbying efforts, really became familiar with the Evansville crowd. And when their CEO position opened up, they reached out. And I've been fortunate to very much have a story about connections, that I feel like every time I did end up in a move, it was someone knocking on my door, just like when I left that initial community that I started after college in, it was the CEO of the then Muncie Chamber who came down, asked me to have lunch. I'd met him at some events and said, hey, I need you to move to Muncie, and here's what I want you to do, and so been just fortunate. And I think that's a real, message for anyone, no matter where you are in your career, always building out that network, right? And trying to help others because you never know, when that might circle back to you. But then they made it to the Evansville region, so the Southwest Indiana Chamber, where then the project became not building the interstate north, but south, which was, as we stated, we had this cul-de-sac. The interstate stopped, and you had the Ohio River, and no plan for a bridge. And meanwhile, our friends in Kentucky were making some progress, and in Tennessee were making some progress, and we realized, oh my gosh, we need over $1 billion bridge. And so when this was brought to me in my first month on the job, I said, okay, I know exactly what to do. We're calling our friends in Henderson, Kentucky. We're saying, you bring your best business minds to the table and political minds. We'll bring ours. Let's form a new board and let's get this done. And it was what many have said, the fastest moving bridge project probably in quite some time in our country. And so it was a lot of fun to kind of see that move. It helped that we had a internationally renowned bridge builder in the market who we, I kind of arm twisted a little that, hey, can you give us some analysis on what this bridge really should cost? Because we think what's been proposed or messaged is incorrect. And sure enough, they were able to shrink that down for us. And then we were really able to have conversations once we moved that price point under $1 billion. So that was one of our initiatives. Another was really a community branding initiative around how do we kind of increase, our confidence in ourselves and start talking about ourselves. I think Evansville always felt disconnected from the rest of the state of Indiana. So, how do we walk with more confidence in who we are? And so pulled together a number of partners. It was a great collaboration and really built out EAs for Everyone, Evansville. And, it's so neat to look now, about 10 years later at how that's been built out, organizations changing their names to, their E version of something. And so, yes,
that's
so Evansville.
Exciting. Yeah, and the thing that comes to mind straight away as soon as you said that is like, we're going to call the other side of the water because they're going to benefit from it too, right? Like it makes total sense to do that. But a lot of people think I, me, and this bridge we're going to get them to come to us. No, we're also going to go to them as well. The bridge works both ways.
Exactly. And hey, half of it's in Kentucky, right? And so you think about, right, the fact you need both governors, and it's kind of this fascinating story, actually. We had the MOU signed by the two governors literally about 48 hours before Mike Pence was tapped by Donald Trump to be the vice presidential candidate. Yeah. I mean, it was one of those just in the nick of time. And we knew that was underway, so we were really having to push those final weeks to get everything signed and moved accordingly. So what year is this then before, everything's obviously going well, you get the bridge project. What year is this? And then we'll move into kind of how we get here in Oklahoma City. So that's a great question. What year would that have been? I'll have to go back and think about that here. I want to say
18.
I think it was a little bit before that. But yeah, somewhere in there.
So obviously, you get that project done, you move on to, you're happy where you're at and you're doing things. Do you go elsewhere between there and Oklahoma City, or do you stay there? You go to Tennessee, is that right?
So yes, it was interesting. So I've been very involved in our national association. I love professional development and lifting others up in the industry. That's something I've always been really concerned about. And so I had served as chair of our Chamber of the Year process. So we had won in Bloomington and Evansville the National Chamber of the Year award for our level of chambers. And so I had chaired this process and came down to Chattanooga being a finalist. And so I'd really been able to spend some time with their leadership during our conference and got to know them. And they ended up winning. And went back and congratulated them, and we all, went our separate ways. And about 3 weeks later, I received a call from one of their leaders that, hey, our CEO just announced his retirement. It was already his retirement gig, the chamber, and he had been there a few years. And they said, you really need to take a look at this. They're going to be reaching out to you. And one thing led to another. And, we were fortunate enough to, again, be asked to serve that community. and had a lot of great efforts we worked on there. One was a community visioning process. Another was, a 5-year economic development workforce talent pipeline plan that would really lift up that vision. Mm-hmm. And so that's, I think, some of the work we're most proud of. Also working on a new arena for a baseball stadium, I should say, a new ballpark. That was something in kind of the final months, getting that across the finish line. Yeah. But yeah, just a lot of body of work there in the Chattanooga area. Again, during COVID, I think leading during the COVID times, Mike, right, was so interesting for a lot of leaders. So, what we did to help really build the resiliency of the business community very intentionally, we moved everything remote, overnight, and had a lot of success with that. And then really on our, we went all in on remote workers and saw a huge boon in our population during that time as we were really intentional about creating Chattanooga Calling, right? Yeah. And all the supports that go with that of welcoming new people to the market and really playing into what we were known for, which was outdoor space.
Yeah. Yeah, obviously it's nice to be kind of headhunted and wanted, right? To get those phone calls. I mean, clearly, at that point, if it happens multiple times, you're very good at what you do and people want you and you're on a short list. But the other thing is everyone's different too. Every place is different. So It's not just like a roadmap of I've got my roadmap. This is what I do at every place I go to and this works. Everyone's different, so there's so many different skills and that team building and just bringing people together and just getting everyone in a room and just saying, how do we figure this out, right? And getting the best people in the room is the key as well, right? Not just having a room full of kind of collared shirts and bald heads or whatever to just share coffee and twiddle your thumbs a little bit. Yes. So I'm sure you've come across in your time in the business as well. Sure. So how do we go then from there then? Have you ever been to Oklahoma at this point? Do you have Oklahoma ties? Naturally, Oklahoma City Chamber comes calling to you just because that's been, I assume that since that's what's happened to you in your career as well. Chambers come calling your way, but how, what is that like? And for your family and kids, you've been moving around a lot, right? It's your husband's been in the military and he's not the one moving anymore. It's it's you moving everybody instead. Right. It's also, I'm sure would be used to it, but the kids as well. It's a big deal to move around like that. So. It
is a big deal. And, for people, my husband and I, neither one of us had ever moved growing up, started in the high school, the kindergarten we were in and finished those in the same school system. But great question, Mike. So for us, we thought Chattanooga was it. Our kids were in great schools. We really loved the market. But I had this affinity for Oklahoma City for about 10 years. So 10 years ago, it was in 13. The chamber here hosted our national convention. Okay. And I thought, gosh, there's so much going on. And at the time I knew Roy. Roy's legendary in our industry, right? And I remember talking to him at a reception that night, just thinking, gosh, what the body of work this chamber is involved in. And of course, he's brilliant. And I thought, this is just impressive work, right? And so it kind of went in my mind that, okay, this now needs to be a chamber I watch. Because I had always been focused on who are those chambers bigger than us. When I became in love with this career at 22, I was always looking at who are those top leaders I need to ping every now and then and learn from them, and what communities do I really need to be studying. So, it's funny, when I had been in Indiana, Chattanooga had been one, and then once I discovered Oklahoma City, again, for 10 years, Oklahoma City had really been one for me. I also, going back, I can't believe this, 20 years ago, when I graduated from Chamber School, which is hosted by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and I was actually meeting with OU leadership yesterday, and I shared that, gosh, last time I'd been on campus was about 20 plus years ago, and they in the past had hosted this Chamber School, so there were different options in the country where you could go, and it was a winter institute. It ended up being moved, but I spent 4 years, 1 week a year here. And so I had been, in that regard, also in the market. So then fast forward, also again, when I was in Evansville, I had asked former Mayor Mick Cornett to come and speak, and he gave a wonderful fireside chat about maps, as well as about the attempt and strive that we all have around, how do we address the obesity challenge here. And so it was just a real fascinating discussion, which then again elevated my interest. And so I talked to people in Evansville about maps, and it was really something we should study. I had brought that idea to a few folks in Chattanooga as well, that, hey, this is something we really need to study and look at what this city has done. And then, so again, fast forward, when I started receiving pings that, Roy had announced his retirement, I thought, wow, that's far away. I don't know. We're really happy with where we are. But the more, once we were really contacted about the process, we started looking at it and we said, okay. And I think candidly for me, while I've loved every city we've been in and its people, because I really adore people, and I believe cities are comprised of brilliant, wonderful people who want to contribute and give back. Oklahoma City is so special. The Oklahoma standard, you feel it. I felt it as a visitor here when we were, looking at this opportunity, and vice versa, right? We were being considered. And I feel like I've been in search for my match, for what is that match city? And just feel really honored to be here in it, because I think, and it was interesting, someone I know really well in the industry said, Christy, you need to be somewhere without a ceiling. And Oklahoma City is the one city that doesn't have a ceiling in terms of what it can dream, the city of dreamers, right? What it can dream, what it can believe in itself and execute on. I mean, show me another city where residents have invested their own dollars to make a difference in the way Oklahomans have, in such a process that's really integral to who we are. The partnership with the city and the chamber around maps, these citywide campaigns, it is so unique. And, it's such a privilege to be a part of the process here and help learn from. One of the things I love, Mike, is you surround yourself with brilliant people and you just watch them. You watch them go, and, you try to convene and collaborate and move things. But kind of back to your earlier point, too, about every community is different. So someday when I have time, I want to get back into ballroom dancing. I've done some of it in my past, and I love it. And to me, when you're in a city, it's very much like a beautiful waltz. Like you have to feel your partner. You have to feel the city. You have to follow their steps, right? And the moves of their steps. And so you can't come in, I've had people, Christy, what is your vision for the city? Well, you have to really come in, and I've been on this 90-day listening and learning tour that now, just completing 4 months, we're wrapping up, though it never ends. You never stop listening or learning, ever. Let me be clear. But you have to start moving into a space of action. And so to me, I think it's all about how do we create opportunities to harness the energy and ideas of the brilliant people who are here, whether they've been here since birth or whether they're here by choice, like me, later in life. Some of us, we take the scenic route to get here. And, how do we harness that energy in them and then create our vision and our plan for the future? And I think that's where we sit right now, is this tremendous opportunity. And what I've been hearing in the community, there's so much excitement about the direction and path we're on. But how do we create together a more refined strategy for this next iteration?
Back to is the maps thing in Oklahoma City kind of legendary around the country in the chamber world?
100%. In fact, I just hosted, I chair our national association, which is, again, the professional development side of our industry this year. And I just hosted about 50 chamber leaders from all over the country and some of the brightest markets in the country, small, medium, and large, right? And they were blown away by our cleanliness, our friendliness, our parks downtown. We had them on the streetcar. on a streetcar tour, which was fantastic. We had them hear from both Roy and Craig Freeman about maps and how it works. And so many of them said, yeah, see, there's so few communities that could pull this off in the country. And so, yes, it is absolutely legendary for sure in our industry.
That's good to know, because I mean, when you grow up here, right, or people listening, like I didn't grow up here, and I was, I came here in 2011, so I know a little bit about it, but I wasn't here for everything. And people who grow up here, they just think that's just normal to them, right? Like you mentioned the Oklahoma Standard earlier, and just the willingness of the community, it's just normal. Whereas, like you said, you come from all over the country and you see other people and you talk to different, go to conferences, talk to people, and they're like, we could never pull this off, right? Yes. Like they might riot if we tried, but yeah, it's interesting to hear that. I'm glad to hear that as well. So getting here, what's like, it's been a while, like I said, since you've probably been back and forth, and this last 90 days of just fast tracking you to meet everyone, know everyone, get you kind of involved and really up to speed. That's pretty exciting to do for the last 90 days, right? Like a tour of the city to meet every mover and shaker and just kind of get the right people. How do you feel after that 90 days?
Well, first of all, there are so many leaders here, and I apologize to anyone I haven't had a chance to spend time with yet, because there is still work to be done too. So you're trying to build this in, but it just reinforces the decision, Mike, to be here. Absolutely, and I was really taken even by the search committee. When you start in with, Larry Nichols, who chaired it, Sean Trasky, who chairs the board, right? You meet leaders like that are, have such a strong past and tenure here in our community, and the level of engagement and passion that they showed towards the community, despite all their business, demands, right, that they're willing to put that much into the entity, just told me, the caliber of this institution. So to me, in terms of the listening and learning tour, I think there's a lot of clarity around where we need to go, opportunities, right? I think definitely talent pipeline, workforce development, right? We hear that over and over. For those businesses that are struggling right now with that, for the individuals that are trying to strike that balance of finding their match, there's some real opportunities, I think, and pathway development here, particularly around STEM, that we see to help, again, some of our targeted industries. When you think about defense and aerospace, you think about bioscience, right? I mean, we have some wonderful opportunities. And I always think, again, back to that dance with the community, you need to see what your assets are and really play up those assets, play up your strengths, right? Try to minimize your weaknesses to the best extent you can, but it's all about your strengths because every community is different. So, how do we think about that workforce piece? How do we dive into the next level? And again, those targeted industries where we really have opportunities. And I think also, our image and brand nationally can come to another level. We have such a brilliant community, and how do we showcase our story in a stronger way? We're now the 20th largest city in the country, 42nd metro, so MSA. It's the competition is different. We used to be the 31st, I think, 31. We were ranked number 31 in terms of state or city size. Now we're 20th. So when you move up that many slots, again, the competition changes. And so the playbook's different. The playbook for the last couple decades was absolutely brilliant. But now we have to think through, okay, what is our strategy for the next decade? And those are just a few highlights, in addition to, I think, research and innovation. How do we really start to take research and innovation, entrepreneurship, to another level as well? Yeah,
definitely. And the other thing, that obviously, in the last few years, people have seen, the whole Sizdale Park development, right? Yes. Downtown. You've had, Gary do his thing with the national, First National Building and all of this thing. And obviously the goal of the chamber is to generally, drive economic development. But I think the thing that people forget is people forget that, they live here, they've grown up here, they've spent most of their lives here. Even though it doesn't look like it benefits them, right? And that's the one thing that kind of if you can just elaborate and talk on it a little bit, is they might just see, oh, a new business is coming in from out of town, and that's great for someone, but what does that mean for me? Right? Like, I think it's people, I don't think they understand, or it's not explained well enough, of all these businesses coming in is driving money, and that's making your city better. You know, it's kind of like that small town situation where, like, you look at Broken Bow, for example, right? A lot of people who live in Hochtown and Broken Bow are mad because all these people from Dallas and Oklahoma City and Tulsa are coming down on vacation. It's like they've ruined their spot. Like, this was our spot. And there is some sense of that, I think, in the city, right? You got people coming in and new restaurants and but at the same time, you know, the quote, rising tide lifts all boats, it makes sense. How do you go about educating the negative people, right? Or the people that, you know, wish it was how it used to be, you know, all of that stuff. How do you get through that? And not just in Oklahoma City, but you've dealt with this your entire career as well.
Yes.
How does, like, does that resonate? Does that
yes,
make sense?
100%, Mike, because I'm usually hired in to help take a city to the next level. It's like we've been flat or we're growing, but we really want to, you know, think differently about it. And it's a completely valid question, right? So there are a number of things, you know, when you, of course, I will state our favorite type of economic development is when our existing companies grow and thrive and expand. Number one goal.
Paycom, for example.
Right. You want to see your local companies grow, thrive. But you also have to have that mix of let's bring some in, right? And I think, you know, now we're at a point where we look at, you know, who do we really want to think about? Who do we really want to go after here? And what does that do? You know, when you see economic expansion, business expansion in the market, what it does, it brings in more jobs. Sometimes those jobs are going to be, you know, for local people. Sometimes it'll bring in new talent to the marketplace. Yes, it increases the tax base. So ideally, it helps to, you know, keep taxes at a reasonable level for the rest of us. But at the same time, we're able to continue to expand amenities. Yes, it brings in new cultural and arts opportunities. Some of the businesses we've been able to bring in here have been big sponsors of, you know, whether it's the Thunder, the Dodgers, you know, you name it, to, you know, you think about all of our arts and cultural organizations too, and what they represent and the vibrancy they bring to the community. And arts is a part of economic development. You know, a quick sidebar, you know, 20 years ago when I was in the early stages in the industry, you didn't hear about the arts, and you heard quality of life somewhat, though again, Oklahoma City was ahead of the curve on the quality of life piece, especially for those communities like, you know, those on beaches or with mountains, you know, they can cheat. They don't have to work as hard on quality of life as those of us who might not have beaches or mountains, right? And so you think about that piece of it. The quality of life piece is such an undercurrent, and that is so important. That's why our organization's involved in community campaigns. The issue campaigns is the quality of life piece. But yeah, when you bring in a company, I mean, it's all of those impacts, right? It's increase in the tax space. It's new jobs, and that's really how you have population growth. The key to population growth is job growth. And, you know, I always look at it, you have cities that are either declining, they're staying flat, or they're increasing. And it's a matter of, you know, how much they're increasing sometimes, right? And I understand that, you know, I've had some folks say to me, how do we continue to maintain our culture as we grow? And to me, that Oklahoma standard, and I look at the great work of the National Memorial Museum, Carrie and her team, you know, the work that they do around, you know, the community conversations, and how do we continue to think through civic dialogue and how we engage everyone. And I've challenged some folks by saying, or invited them and saying, we all play a role in building our culture here. It's welcoming new neighbors to your neighborhood by what we received, for example, dinners and cookies, and, you know, people literally, when we're unboxing, coming into our house with the movers going, hey, we have some cookies for you. I mean, that's phenomenal. You don't see that everywhere. And multiple neighbors, right? That's phenomenal. And that's paying it forward in the culture. So when we have new neighbors, absolutely we're going to be doing that, right? Yeah. To someone new on your team, even if they're in a different, you know, department, if you will, within your corporation or your entity, asking them to lunch. Hey, welcome to our organization. And, those acts of kindness, kindness, right? That's what we're known for. Yes, dreams and kindness. We are the modern frontier. And I think, thinking through all of that. And I'm excited. Our Visit OKC team is getting ready to launch OKC Insider. I think I have that right.
Okay. Insider
OKC. And it's about training. It's an online module where people can learn more about, that Oklahoma standard and how we embody that for visitors in particular. But it also helps, everyone who moves here, they're a visitor first, usually. Most don't, move here sight unseen. And so, that first impression is what helps close the deal for someone thinking about it. It's what closed the deal for my family, right? When I was convinced, but I, kind of finger crossed and prayed that my husband and my boys would be convinced. And it was the woman, I still tell this story, I'd love to figure out who she is. We stepped off the plane. My 13-year-old read a book the whole time. We get off the plane and she said, son, I want you to take this $20 because you read a book the whole time on that flight and you never had your technology out. And I was so impressed by you. And he, of course, we said, no, thank you. We don't need to take your money. But that gesture, that set him, right? That set a total standard for his experience here. And I can't thank her enough for that. And I don't know who she is. But it's those little acts of kindness that make us unique. And I think in particular, what's going on in our world right now and in our country, places that are kind to one another, I think it's a real opportunity area for us. So a long answer to your question, but ultimately, again, when you bring in more businesses, when you're expanding, that's when you have vibrancy in a community, period.
Yeah. Well, and to that point as well, I've also heard a lot of people, people who graduate from OU or OSU or Oklahoma City, wherever it is, they generally think, where am I going next, right? They think I'm going to Dallas to work, I'm going somewhere else. And well, because of this, now that you retain all those people as well, right? And I'm sure there's a lot of parents that are happy that their kids aren't moving to Dallas to go work in a city. They're now staying here.
Yes.
Right? Or they're going, they're staying in state at least.
Yes, when you have great opportunities for work. Yes, that drives it. Exactly.
So good. All right, finishing up, some fun questions. You did kind of reference growing up on a farm.
Well, my father did.
Getting up in the morning. Do we have a favorite animal? Did you name the pets, the cows, or was that don't name the pets because you might be eating it soon?
Well, and again, that was more my father's experience. So by the time I came along, I didn't. I grew up with dogs. We grew up with dogs. We have a dog lover, but just love pets in general. Love animals. We enjoy horseback riding. Some great spots here in OKC for that. The equine piece of the work, and of course, from a Visit OKC piece, the fairgrounds. So we've been out to the fairgrounds and can't wait for a lot of the shows this summer and just what that brings to the market as well.
What dog do you have?
So we have an Old English sheepdog. Okay. And so, by the way, love Barquet. Quick plug for Barquet, and have had some great memories there. But yes, Old English sheepdog.
All right. Then some quick fire questions to finish up. What are you afraid of?
Afraid.
Yeah.
That's hard. I would say maybe not fully meeting my purpose, but I feel like so far, we're making a good dent on it, but just continuing that. Yes.
Yeah. Not reaching your full potential.
Yeah. And I think sometimes, as a parent, right?
Sure.
There's a lot of fear in particular around, your kids and your parenting style. And am I getting this right? It's very humbling. Yeah. So that probably would be where my fears lie.
Is there a food that you just cannot stomach?
Well, I have a gluten allergy, pretty severe. So yes, there are some.
There's
gluten.
A lot.
Yes.
Good to know. Let's see. What else? I've got a long list of quick fire questions.
Sure.
They never turn into quick fire. But you mentioned ballroom dancing. Do you have another secret talent? Or not that it's secret.
Yes, I wouldn't say that's much of a talent, but. No, I don't have kind of that obscure talent that I'm aware of. No.
Do you have a guilty pleasure when you do have time to yourself, or do you have time to go, watch Netflix or whatever it is? Like, are you picking up a book? Are you, thumbing through whatever it is?
Well, I love to read. But I think, just being outdoors, being active, going on walks, right? We love the parks around here, and just watching the kids play. And I'll often have my dog tied around my waist and just walking in circles as I'm watching them on the playground. Those kinds of things, I think, to me are what brings me a lot of life.
Anything you haven't experienced yet that you have on the bucket list?
Gosh, there are a bunch of things here in OKC that I still have not been able to experience. So looking forward, and I won't name names there, but there's just so much to do here. I mean, obviously there are festivals and events that haven't happened yet that my family and I are excited to experience. I mean, gosh, this last weekend with the Arts Fest and then the Marathon and Scissortail Park is just such a dream. And the baseball game, there was so much going on. But in terms of other bucket list items, I would love to compete someday in a full. Sorry about that. I did not cut that off.
You're busy. You have two phones.
Yes, too much going on.
Yeah.
But I would love to compete and not just a sprint triathlon, but a full triathlon. I'm not sure if I want to go, full Ironman. What exactly we're dealing with here, but I'd love to step it up, even half, right, and keep progressing.
The Red Man, is that the Oklahoma City one? There's one here we have it around the lake or Lake After and stuff there. Yes, that's a half one.
So yes. I mean, so nice. Maybe working towards that one day. I think at one point I was probably in good enough shape to just be able to pull it off without too much training, right. But these days, and not where I need to be on that front.
And it takes serious dedication as well, right?
It does. But
2-hour training sessions all the time.
But being a natural swimmer, it's kind of funny, the swimming portion I just love.
That's the one thing that I like, that would, because I've seen it, and I had friends who have done it, and I'm like, the swim scares me.
Yes,
right? Because
I understand. A lot of people.
I cannot coordinate my legs and my arms. I'm just an arm swimmer, and the legs just drag.
That's hard.
So I need to figure that out.
Yes.
But no, I think that's something that comes with as you get older, right? Like when I was 18, 19, the last thing I could think about was running a marathon. Yes. And then get to my late 20s and early 30s, I'm like, I can do this. It's kind of strange how the marathon runner age and the ultra marathon, the Ironman world, it is kind of like 30 to 40 to 50 range, right? It's kind of, it's amazing how that works.
I think you're right. Unless you grew up in it, like you have a parent or someone close to you bringing you into that world, I think you're right. It's with age comes wisdom sometimes.
Love it. So being a mum and being very involved and working but also having a lover of travel, athletics and stuff like that. What's that like being a mum in a new city and being in the role that you are in as well?
Yes.
You get the greatest feedback.
That's such a great question too. I think a few things, I've been thrilled at how the boys have assimilated into the school, and the school has reported, for mid-year transfers, but still it's hard. And I think as kids are older, it becomes hard. They kind of have their network, they have their kids they've spent a lot of time with, and some people are really open to new friends, others less so, right? I have one who's extremely outgoing, the other a little more reserved, but I think again it's through the sport and activity piece where that interest has really helped form some new friends. I have one, basketball and soccer track right now. I have another, swimming and tennis and martial arts regarding his interest, but again a voracious reader. I mean, my oldest is just will read a series. I mean, I think Harry Potter he's read 10 times. I mean, it's, the whole series. And so they have a variety of interests, but then trying to explore, the city for them. And not just the city, but the region. And, again, we're kind of an adventurous family. We're looking forward to RVing a bit this summer and getting out into, again, different pockets of the state to better understand it.
You have 4 boys, right?
So I have 3 boys, 1 bonus son, and then a bonus daughter. But yes, and 2 younger ones. Yes.
And you all hit the road in the RV. That's like
yes.
How? So that I'd love to. I have 2. We just had 2 dogs, right? And I'd love to just kind of do that. And the one thing that this country is great for is just hitting the road, right? And you can go anywhere. God, and then obviously RVing kind of got very popular in COVID too. But like, I need to do that at some point.
Yes. Well, unfortunately, my husband's very adept in all of that. I'm more of the, do we have everything we need clothes-wise and food-wise role. But yes, he's the one. There's a lot, there's just a lot to it. So I won't get into some of the gory details. But if you haven't seen RV, it's a hilarious movie. It's a much watch before you endeavor on that. Yeah. So yes. But there's so much going on in OKC. I really, there's a lot of just exploring to do right now. And it's so exciting about, just thinking about our film industry of, films that are being showcased here. The other night we watched If You Can Only I Can Only Imagine. And, the fact that film was again, produced right here, so much of it, and just reminds you of the story of Oklahoma City and our Oklahoma standard. So thank you.
Finishing up with that Oklahoma standard, this was your first marathon weekend, right?
Yes.
I mean,
it was magical.
How was that from... Assuming you didn't run, so how was the...
I did not run, but we were part of the celebration and the activity and the energy, Sunday downtown. It was just phenomenal. And of course, our Visit OKC team very much, ingrained in that in support of the National Memorial Museum. But yeah, just the spirit, the energy in the community and the people I interfaced with at the park and just their excitement for the marathon. Of course, it was a magical day weather-wise, right?
Yeah, it was just such a good day.
I mean, it was perfect. That day, it's just, thank goodness, right? But yes, it was lovely.
Super. Well, thank you so much for an hour of your time. I really appreciate you, deciding to take the job and coming here and excited to see the things that you do for this city, and I've been here, like I said, since August 2011 now. So it's been great for me to see this city grow in the last 10 years, but I'm excited for the future, and it only helps me with the podcast to have more interesting people on the podcast and guests. So I'm excited to see what happens. And for people listening, I'll put the link to the Chamber website and other things that they can go and reach out to and visit OKC. And we'll catch you next episode.
Well, thank you so much for having us. It's a privilege to be here. So many talented, amazing people here, just like yourself, contributing and kind of taking ownership in the city and making it better in their own way. So thank you for that.
Yeah, it's I love doing it. So this is not my day job. I wish it was at some point. Maybe we'll get there. But thank you so much. It means a lot. And welcome to Oklahoma City.
Thank you.
Hope you guys enjoyed that great episode. Thank you so much for listening. As always, huge shout out to our sponsors, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, sharing Oklahoma story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com and follow them on Instagram for daily updates at OklahomaHOF. Our other sponsor, the Chickasaw Nation, amazing sponsor. They do amazing things for the state, and they're always sponsoring something in Oklahoma. They're a huge supporter of Oklahoma, and without their support, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. And our third sponsor is Diffie Ford Lincoln down in El Reno. Now, this one makes me so happy because these guys are great friends of mine, play a lot of golf together. I've bought my cars from them, do most of my oil changes down there, have a cup of coffee, hang out down in El Reno. It's a good spot to go. And not only are they great friends, but they provide a great service. So for over 60 years, third generation family owned Oklahoma business down in El Reno. They're also in Bethany as well. So people in the Bethany area know the Diffies really well. But if you're looking for anything new, used, Ford, Lincoln, or whatever, I'm sure they could find anything you want. Check them out, diffieford.net, and then on Instagram at diffiefordlincoln. This episode is presented by the Choctaw Nation. The Choctaw people have a rich history and a bright future. At the Choctaw Cultural Center, you can take part in a story 14,000 years in the making. Stroll through our immersive exhibits portraying Choctaw life from the moment our ancestors emerged from the Nani Wehi in Mississippian homelands to the Trail of Tears, where we lost so many loved ones, and finally to the modern-day tribe making a positive impact on local communities throughout southeastern Oklahoma. Try your hand at our social dancing and stickball and learn more about our vibrant culture through demonstrations, workshops, and classes. The kids will have a blast in our Luxie Activity Center. The Choctaw Cultural Center is more than a museum. It's a living, breathing experience. Visit ChoctawCulturalCenter.com to plan your visit.
Thank you for listening. We are inspired by those around us and hope that you are too. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review so we can keep telling your stories. For more great Oklahoma content, follow This Is Oklahoma on Facebook and Instagram.